Hello everybody, welcome back to the 51 Yarns Spin Along. My name is Bex from the Tiny Fibre Studio podcast, and this is week 27, which is cotton. So this is probably one that is a little bit outside of the comfort zone of quite a lot of people, because certainly in my part of the world, and I know in a lot of other countries, you primarily get taught to spin wool because that's the thing that's more predominant. So you get used to that, and some people never come across a reason to spin cotton. I have to be honest that I don't knit with cotton or use cotton a lot in my craft, and so I don't generally tend to have a need to spin it, but I have spun it a few times, frequently enough to feel like I'm able to show you a few different demonstrations of how you can spin cotton. I will show you how I can spin it on a drop spindle, very carefully. It is the way to do that. But I'll also talk about how it's done on other types of supported spindles and other specific cotton spinning tools. And then I'll go on to spinning it on the wheel. I'll spin it on the matchless, just on a normal spinning wheel. And then I'll also spin on the Quill attachment for my mini spinner. So those are the demonstrations that I'll be doing today. I guess the first place to start is what cotton is in the first place, because maybe that's not completely obvious to people who don't grow up in cotton producing areas. It's not quite as obvious as there's a sheep. Everything that's on the fuzzy bit on the outside is wool. So cotton comes from a plant, let's start with that bit. And essentially the bit that we spin is like the fruit of a plant. So after the plant flowers and gets pollinated, it grows this fruit, which is the cotton. These are actually some little cotton seed buds, I believe they're called bolls. And these were actually given to me by Judith Mackenzie when I had my one and only spinning lesson with Judith, and she handed out some of these, which I think she had picked herself, which was really lovely. So these are the sort of seed heads or seed pods, if you will, and you can sit there and sort of tease them out, and you will get spinnable fibre, and you'll actually get quite a lot from one little seed head because the fibres are packed quite tightly. But what you're more likely to be spinning is some kind of cotton sliver. This is cotton sliver. This is actually broken cotton tops, essentially sliver. This is the thing that you're a little bit more likely to come across if you're shopping for it online or at a fibre festival or something like that. You could also spin from an unrolled cotton ball, which is what this is. This will be a lot more slubby, but it's still totally possible to spin from a cotton wool ball. It's just likely to be even shorter fibres than you would find in one of these. So just be a little bit careful. If you try one of these and you find it really, really hard work, don't be put off the idea of trying cotton again, because it's likely that just the fibres that you find in these are just a really, really, really short staple length. But if you don't have anything else kicking around, this is a place where we use cotton all the time in a format that is actually spinnable. The principle of spinning cotton is the same as the principle of spinning basically anything else, which is that you have these individual fibres and you want to twist them to make them all kind of mesh together and hold together as a stable yarn. That's all very well. The challenge with cotton is that it's a very, very short staple length. So whereas when you're working with wool, most wools are at least 2 inches of staple length, with cotton you can be talking about working with 1/4 of an inch, a centimetre, you know, very, very, very teeny tiny little bits of staple length. So if you've done a fair bit of spinning already, you'll probably have noticed that in general, the longer the fibre, the fewer twists per inch it needs for it to actually hold together. So if you imagine the opposite end of that spectrum, cotton having a very short staple length, you need a lot of twist to have cotton hold together and become a stable yarn. Where's it gone now? As I was saying, so working with a very short staple length, it means that we need to get lots of twist in there very quickly. But also, because it is a very short staple length, we also need to make sure that whatever we're spinning with isn't pulling on the yarn too hard, because until lots of twist gets in here, it's just going to break apart really, really, really easily. So we need to try to prevent too much tension on the yarn before it's properly stable. And that's going to be kind of a recurring theme as we go through these demonstrations. You'll see that a lot of times when you're spinning cotton, you have different phases of the spinning. So the first phase is usually just to put enough twist in to be able to draft it out. The second phase is putting plenty of twist in, if necessary, doing a ply-back test to see how much twist you've got. And then the third stage is actually kind of getting it wound on to however you're storing it. There are lots of different ways that you can spin cotton and lots of different bits of equipment that you can use. The most simple is probably using a spindle of some description. So you can do this with a drop spindle. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that this is the best way to do it, certainly not the most traditional, because we mentioned that we need to try and prevent too much tension on the yarn before it's properly got stable. And the problem with using a drop spindle is that you've got that weight pulling on the yarn. So unless you can get twist in there really quickly and get it stable before the weight of the spindle actually starts having an effect, then you're just going to find that your yarn just kind of falls apart. But I will show you how this is done. And we'll also just talk briefly about some of the other types of spindles. The type of spindle that's probably most prevalent when it comes to spinning cotton is something called a tackly. A tackly is a small supported spindle, and it's usually made of metal. It's designed to spin very, very quickly for short periods of time. And of course, a supported spindle is a fantastic way to put lots of twist in without any pressure or tension on the fibre, because there's no weight of that spindle. It's literally just putting twist in with very little tension on the fibre. But I don't have any supported spindles because the only times that I've tried them, I have found it a little bit similar to trying to pat your head and rub your stomach. There's a lot of coordination required, and frankly, I don't have the patience to bother to learn to do that if there's an equally efficient way that I can do it using something else. So this is not the most efficient type of spindle to do this on, but I will show you that it can be done. So all I'm going to do is just put plenty of twist in here, and I'm just going to keep inching it up, but allowing the twist to get just slightly past my fingers. And I'm just constantly keeping the speed of the spindle up and letting that twist get past my fingers after I've drafted a little section out, so that I've constantly got twists going in there. Otherwise, if I don't do that, if I don't allow the twist past my fingers, it is literally just going to fall apart. So there you go. Spinning cotton on a drop spindle can be done. Now that is the drafting phase. So at that point, I've got enough twist in it that it holds together. But if I were to do a ply-back test at this stage, I suspect that there probably wouldn't be enough twist in there. Yeah, it's a very slight angle to the twist. So I would then want to put more twist in there to make it ply in the way that I wanted to. So as much extra twist as I can get in there in one flick of the spindle. A little bit more of a ply-back test, and then I can see if I'm roughly in the right place or not. Yeah, that's much better. So we've got stage 1 being the drafting stage. Stage 2 being putting enough twist in it for the yarn that you want. And then stage 3 being bringing that yarn onto whatever storage device you're using at the time. In this case, it's Turkish spindle, but wrapping it around the spindle or getting it onto the bobbin on a wheel and so on and so forth. So like I say, drop spindle's not necessarily the best option, but it's likely that you've got a drop spindle kicking around somewhere, and so rather than go out and buy lots of new equipment, if you're not sure that cotton spinning is something you're going to get into, then maybe try it with a drop spindle. All I will say is just make sure that it's quite a light drop spindle. This is a little teeny tiny Turkish spindle from Ian Tate of IST Crafts on the Isle of Wight, and I love this one. It's an English bog oak one with some brass weights in the end, but any kind of light spindle would be good for that. Option number 2 when it comes to spinning cotton is to spin it on a spinning wheel, and this is totally possible. It's not necessarily the most traditional way to see cotton spinning done, but it's perfectly possible. You just need to keep a few things in mind when you're setting your wheel up. So the first thing is to switch to whatever the fastest speed whirl is that you have. In my case, I'm using the high speed whirl and a high speed bobbin. I'm using double drive because double drive generally allows for a lighter take up, and as we've already mentioned, we don't want too much tension on the yarn until it's ready to receive it. So that's the reason I've switched to double drive. This is totally possible on Scotch tension. I've seen it done. I just tend to use this in double drive anyway, so it kind of makes sense to leave it there. And again, we're just going to be breaking down the steps into those 3 different stages. So I've already been spinning a little bit, but it's useful to give yourself a nice long leader if you're starting a new bobbin. That allows you to kind of get the tension right and also get some twist into the yarn properly. But once you've started it, the first stage is our drafting. So I'm just going to treadle just a little bit to get enough twist in to be able to get it holding together. Okay, and if necessary at this point, I can just pull any slubs or anything out. And then the second stage is speeding up the treadling to get plenty of twist going in there. And then when I'm happy, allowing it to go into the orifice. So slowing my treadling back down to do the drafting. Evening the yarn out. And then just speeding up that treadling. Once you get into a little bit of a rhythm, you're probably going to get to a stage where you can say that, okay, I'm going to do, I don't know, 5 slow treadles to do the drafting, and then 10 fast treadles to do the twist. Obviously, that's going to be case by case basis. Your results will vary from mine. Every so often, just double check to make sure that you have got enough twist in there. Cotton's, in my experience, really deceptive in that you can think that you've put absolutely loads of twist in there, and then when you go and do a ply back test, you realise that there's pretty much nothing there. It feels like you really have to over twist it. But honestly, try a few ply back tests and you'll see what I mean. It has this amazing ability to suddenly just make all of the twist disappear. So slow treadling, draft back. Allow some twist in while you pull back to make it more even. And this bit feels very much like long draw, like you would do with wool, but it's so important to just have that extra little bit of stopping, putting extra twist in, and then letting it onto the wheel. Let me just show you a little bit of what happens if you don't stop and put that extra twist in. So here we've got enough twist going in for the yarn to hold together because I'm able to draft it out. But if I don't put any extra twist in and then go to ply it on itself, let me just get enough that I can show you this. There is basically no twist in there. It needs so much more twist, both in the singles and in the ply. Before it would actually be a stable yarn. So we need to wait and make sure that we put lots of extra twist in there. So it definitely has an impact on your plied yarn, but even just on the singles, what you'll tend to find is that if you don't put enough twist in, you'll be going along absolutely fine and you'll be thinking, oh yeah, it's holding together, it's all good. And then your single breaks and you go to rejoin it from the bobbin and you start trying to find the end on the bobbin and you just realise that it's just all falling apart because there's nowhere near enough twist in it. Ask me how I know. I watched a really good demonstration at my local guild, probably about 6 months or so ago now, by a lady called Amanda Hannaford. You'll know her as Manda Crafts if you are in the UK. And she said that what she does is she kind of lays the cotton over her finger, and when it starts to feel prickly, she knows that she's got enough twist in there. I think I'm yet to develop the sensitivity to the prickliness. So that's how you can spin just using a normal spinning wheel, just being a little bit careful about the break tension and making sure that you put enough twist into your yarn that it's not only going to hold together, but that it's still going to hold together when it's plied as well. But I also wanted to show another method, which is using this thing. This looks a little bit like a weapon. I feel like I could go jousting with it or something. As long as the other person had the same length of jousting pole, because otherwise I think they might have a slight advantage. Anyway, this is called the Quill attachment for the mini spinner. There are some other wheels that have this or similar options as well. So I know that Majorcraft and Lendrum make them for their wheels. Ashford also makes one, which I think I'm right in saying you can use with the Traddy, the Traveller and the Elizabeth. So if you have any of those wheels, you can get a Quill attachment for those. The Majorcraft one is called the Stylus Attachment, and it actually has a little bobbin, which is kind of cool. And the reason why I think it's important to talk about this when we're talking about cotton spinning is that most of the traditional tools that are used for spinning cotton by hand, like booksharkers, are done using a similar technique, so they're spun off the tip. You would also use this technique if you're using a supported spindle, because you'd be essentially doing the same thing, but you just have to imagine that that is your supported spindle turning around and you're feeding your yarn off this way. So I think it's a useful technique to look at, and as I say, I can just plug this into my mini spinner and I can spin from the point. So the Quill attachment for the mini spinner actually comes with a few different parts. So the main part obviously is the quill itself, and this bit goes into the orifice of the mini spinner. And then there is also this plate, which basically sits over the top. There's a little rubber gasket that it sits against. And the idea of that is to make sure that you've got somewhere that you can wind your yarn onto without it potentially getting tangled up on the orifice. There are also a couple of rubber O-ring seals, which potentially you could actually use for putting a bobbin on here. However, if you do that, there's not that much room for a bobbin. You'd be ending up with a very, very small amount of tip. So I'll show you how I do it without a bobbin attached. You can use this as a bobbin winder though, so that's why the O-rings are included, so that you can pop a bobbin on there. And I think I did that in one episode. I'm trying to think which one it was, possibly self-striping. Can't remember why, but I did it for some reason. I had to rewind a bobbin. Whatever, I think it's in there. So here is my mini spinner. At the moment I have a bobbin on here that I'm kind of still working on, so I'm actually going to take this off. It's pretty much full anyway, and the amount that I've got left is definitely not going to fit on this bobbin, so I am going to take this bobbin off, but one of the beauties of the quill attachment is that you don't actually need to do that. You could use it with the bobbin still in place. And then I also need to make sure that I take the orifice reducer out, because at the moment the orifice reducer is sitting in here and this is where the quill needs to go. So I'm going to take that off. So there's my orifice reducer. That is going to go back in the bag for the moment. And then I'm going to pop the quill attachment in here. I always hold on to the back of the flyer while I do that, because otherwise there's a possibility that you can actually push it a little bit too far. So just hang on to that while you're doing it. Okay, so I've just tied a little leader for this one. You want to make sure that the leader is as tight as you can possibly get it, and make sure that you've tied it off in 2 separate directions as well, so that it really stays put. Otherwise that is probably going to be the biggest barrier to you actually making this technique work. You could also I use one of the O-rings just to hold my leader in place, kind of wedge it up against the back. So you'll see that now when I switch the mini spinner on, I can then bring it off the side and I'm adding twist into my yarn. So from the spinning point of view, I'm going to first of all allow the leader to wind on. I'm adding twist every time it twists around the top here. So exactly the same process, bit of twist to be able to draft back, sort out any diameter issues at this stage, pinching the twist off, just allowing some twist to go in. And at this stage you could either just sit here and wait for enough twist to go in, or you could actually speed up the mini spinner, so you could just tweak the dial, make it go a bit quicker. And then I'm just going to stop and then wind that on vertically and then start the whole process again. If you get really well practiced, you will probably get to a point where you can either turn the speed up and just do it all at one speed, or certainly you'll get to a point where you can not have to stop to wind the bobbin back on. If you do get any little slubs, you can just kind of rub them between your fingers and those slubs will probably pretty much disappear. So there you have it. That was 3 different ways to spin cotton, not necessarily using the most traditional tools, I will give you that, but hopefully these are tools that you have access to, at least one of them. And there may be some different techniques there, some different ways of spinning cotton than you've used before, and certainly some different tools. So I hope that this encourages you to give it a try. Even though cotton might not be something that I spin on a regular basis or use on a regular basis, I do think that it does teach you a lot about managing twist and managing what you want your final yarn to be like. So I think from a sort of spinning consciousness point of view, it's a useful thing to have a look at. So hopefully this week you will give it a try and post your resulting photo on Facebook, Instagram or Ravelry with the hashtags that I've put in the description below to be able to enter into the Ply Magazine subscription giveaway. I'm also going to put in the description a little link to some other videos that show more traditional cotton tools, so things like book chuckers and tackleys, because I think they're kind of interesting to look at as well. They might not be tools that you necessarily have in your possession or want to have in your possession, but it's interesting to see how they work. So I'll put a link to those in the description as well. So there we go, that is the end of Cotton Week. I hope this week has been useful for you. If it has, give me a little thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you want to be notified of new episodes as they get uploaded, if you press the little bell icon next to the subscribe button, that will give you a notification on your device whenever I upload a new video. So I hope this has been useful for you. Next week's spin along topic is down wool. So I actually have to have a little look through my fibre stash and see if I have anything that counts as down wool. I'm fairly sure I have, but you know, I should probably think about these things a little bit in advance, shouldn't I? Anyway, hope this was useful. In between now and next week, you can find me on Instagram as Tiny Fibre Studio and on Ravelry, I'm Ibex. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you again next time.